Your thoughts on the Maple Leafs start to the season here, bud?
I think it's been fair. I think that's maybe the best way to explain it. Definitely some highs and some lows and a lot in between for a team that's just kind of, I was thinking about this the other day because I was asked about it. People in Toronto were saying, why can't this Leaf team have a regular season like the Bruins or like the Golden Knights or pick a really good team? And I think my answer is they're not on the same level. And part of it is a mental thing because I heard you guys talking about it on the way in, an instinctual thing. But I also think part of it is a roster construction thing. If you want to take a 30,000-foot view, I think they've got a defense core that needs help.
I think so, Frank. So for me, like from the perspective of the back end, that's like where I want to start. For me, that was always, I think, in good teams that I played on, it started there and it goes there. And I think it starts with the D-man. I know Sammy's struggling a bit. I kind of watched a similar Stuart Skinner out in Edmonton, kind of with the same struggle. He's sloppy. He's not composed. It's not that. But where do you build this back end when there's no support for a struggling goalie?
That's the hard part because it becomes a chicken and the egg thing, right, Carter? Everyone's complaining saying, well, why can't the Oilers get a stop? And then the next thing is, well, why is their defensive zone play so soft coming off the rush when Pius Suter can just walk down Main Street and shoot? Those things all go hand in hand. And I think when you look at the Leafs and, well, first off, they're obviously dealing with some injuries right now. But the other part too is like, I think to me, the John Klingberg addition to this team this year really spoke to, I think, some of the holes that this group has. I mean, think about the role that he's come in and asked to take. It's essentially to spell Morgan Riley on PP1 and come in there and do a better job because there was an opening to do so. But at the same time, then you're asking a lot of John Klingberg on the back end and your own end where he's really struggled. I think confidence has been a huge issue for him. And it's not like he's taking nothing of your salary cap. It's still a decent enough salary chunk that, you wonder if they could have perhaps filled that position instead of with someone that can help you on the power play where you've got your offensive guys that should kind of take control there. If they could have used maybe some more help to play better in their own end, more stout defensively. I don't know exactly off the top of my head who that person might be, but that's sort of, if you're thinking archetype, adding a power play quarterback for me wasn't really like the big need for this team.
Yeah, I think the thinking was to lend some support, as you mentioned, to like a Morgan Riley in terms of a puck mover, but like the guy can't play defense. And I think it's becoming crystal clear that they have a big
should have been crystal clear if they watched him in mini.
You're right. You're right. No, and that's the thing that baffled me, Frank, was more so like the amount of money they gave him, knowing, what they were getting. They had to know what they were getting, no?
And that's the thing. You see John Klingberg in mini last year after the trade deadline, in Anaheim before that, and then, you could kind of like pinpoint on a map where his game started to fall apart. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's physically or mentally or what, after the contract situation didn't work itself out in Dallas. And he apparently left like $50 million on the table. I know I'd be sick to my stomach if I did that, but I can't imagine what it's like to try and feel like you need to go out every night and try and earn that back at a time when, your confidence isn't there, your game's not there, and then physically you're getting older as well.
He's being exposed left and right. There's no doubt about that. So what's your sense on the trade market? Like, is it too early realistically for teams who think they're contenders to go out there and grab a guy? Like, people want to point fingers to the Calgary Flames. Yeah, they make a lot of sense, but is it way too early to make a deal, you think?
I don't think it's too early. I think there's a select few teams that are sort of in the mood to mix things up. Obviously the Calgary Flames and their defense core with the pending UFAs that they have, they're in a spot where they're beginning to look around on the market and check in what the value of some of their guys might be. Tanev, Zadorov, in addition to the obvious one in Hanifin. I think you've got some other teams that are reaching some desperation status, but I'm not entirely sold that the Leafs are there quite yet in terms of getting to the point that they want to mix things up. I also feel like watching this team, these results that we've seen to this point are probably about as middling as they could be. I'd imagine at some point your forward group is going to click better than it has. You're going to get more consistency out of Marner and Matthews. You're going to see more from Bertuzzi at some point. How many stretches like this of 10 games in his career has the production been where it's been? Probably not many. I'd expect to see more. Like, aren't these pieces just going to fall into place? So I'd imagine there's probably a bit of a patient approach in that you also don't want to try and wedge a square peg into a round hole.
No, I agree. I think it will come, right? That depth. The fourth line worries me, Ryan Reaves, with the speed of the game now. But I'm going to go back to the net here. It's my thing. And I think a good example will be last year with the Oilers, right? Again, I want to circle back to that because they overuse Skinner and they get to the playoffs and Jack Campbell was a liability. And right now, to me, Samsonov is just struggling. But to what extent do we overextend Woll? Like, he's still a young kid. Like, is he ready to run with this? And like, where do we get to get him ready to be? You need a 1A, 1B. You need to push, right? There's not many guys in this league that can carry 60 games and still be productive when it comes to the playoffs. So this goalie management right now for me is going to be really important, I think, as we go here.
So, Carter, I'm going to push back against that. I'm going to say, is Joe Woll really that young? And the answer, experience-wise, is yes, in terms of NHL experience, but he's actually only 1 year younger than Samsonov. And he's 25, and we've seen lots of goalies come into this league at a younger age and take the ball and run with it. I agree with your assessment in that if he's on a 60-game pace, it's way too much. But for the time being, while he's carrying the ball, let him run with it for a bit. And then when he begins to cool off, then you go back to Samsonov and see if you can, allow him to find his confidence again. I think that's the answer for right now. But I think Joe Woll's been building for 3 years to this moment. Last year, has a new contract. They designed it purposely for this second year of the deal for him to be in the NHL. And now he's there. He needs to just play.
Hutz, you got a retort to that, bud?
No, I like it. I like the plan. I think it's good. I just think for me, my concern is the overusage, right? Like, if we're going to burn him out, like managing him, I think Samsonov will find his game, but at this point it's got to be, we have to like play the guy that's playing. Because watching last night was it's tough to watch. He's all over the map right now.
Yeah, I would just add too that I think there's a silver lining in all this, and I believe the Leafs have like 5 games in the next 17 days because of the Global Series. So that Frank, that gives Curtis Sanford some time here. Like, I'm under the belief that at some point Ilya Samsonov has to find his game. Like, you just don't go from last year to this where you can't stop a beach ball. I don't think you can.
I think at some point, if he does do that, or if you think he's already there, you've got to go the Jack Campbell route of last year, which is, I'm not even entirely certain there was an injury. You got to just sit out for a couple weeks and find yourself again. And in the same breath, in Edmonton right now, what I'd be advocating for today is bringing up Cal Pickard and seeing if you can get 2, 3, 4 wins out of him. I don't think he's a long-term answer. I don't think you just walk in and sprinkle some pixie dust, but in Bakersfield, he's got a .940 save percentage this season in 4 games. Even if you got to .905 in the NHL, it's an enormous step forward from what the Oilers have been getting to this point. That's what I'd say for right now. And is there someone in the meantime that you can bring up from the Marlies to just give Samsonov some time to find himself?
Would Martin Jones be an option? I know people are bringing his name up.
Why not? I mean, he played 48 games for the Kraken last year. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't he be able to spell this team for a 2, 3, 4 week stretch?
Because that's the thing, right? So you call him up, he's got to go back on waivers. Is that right?
Nope. There are no more re-entry waivers.
Okay.
You would only need waivers after he's on the roster for 10 or more games or 30 or more days. So they'd have some time to bring him up for 6, 7 games and send him back. It's all about cap space.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what I'm thinking. Like, I think to a degree, Frank, it makes sense. It's just more so like, can you stomach rostering 3 goalies, right?
I mean, Montreal's doing it. The Flyers were doing it for a while. I think there's 3 or 4 other teams that have been carrying 3 goalies. Not entirely ideal, but I mean, for the time being, why not?
Yeah, the way Samsonov's playing, it's problematic right now, I would say, for this team. I want a temperature check from you. Is Sheldon Keefe on the hot seat, in your opinion, everything you've gathered?
I don't think so. I mean, look, we were talking about a team that, at certain stretches this year has underachieved. I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to see more fire. I think the killer instinct has been a problem for this team for, I think, longer than Sheldon Keefe's been here. And when you hear Brendan Shanahan talk about it 2 or 3 summers ago, and the key to that phrase killer instinct is not the killer part, it's that it is instinctual. And I don't know that the coach or any coach is going to bring that out. You either have it or you don't. And I think maybe part of what's disappointing is, at least in telling them or listening to them retell the story, would be that it took, not in the moment for people to realize that it took until seeing it and looking at the video and how bad it looked for everyone to really connect the dots on that. That's something that should be noted in real time. And I think everyone would like to see a little more, because, you can make the argument about, can teams that don't have that style or instinct or toughness win? Maybe. But I think when push comes to shove in big moments, when this team has wilted the most, that's what kind of stands out to me, is who's going to step up and get that goal, who's going to be in the fight at the exact moment in time that it matters. You can't win a Stanley Cup in November, but when you continually act the same way and do the same thing over and over again, that's the part that people start to lose faith and hope on.
So for me, it starts, obviously we talk about Keefe and culture and just creating that mentality, but we circle back to it like this core four. Like, again, you're seeing the same things over and over and over again. I know Tavares is a great leader on the ice, but he's a quiet guy? Is he vocal in the room? I know Ryan Reaves is a character, but like, he's not going out there every shift and actually making a dramatic impact on a game. So
playing 8 minutes a night,
right? Like, he's not
Barely
changing a game, right? So with that core four, like, at some point, where does one move, or what's the first to drop here? Because we can't go into this season again doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, but I think part of the problem is that the organization as a philosophy, if I could get that out, they have developed this approach that, bringing the same players back time after time in this core four may seem like lunacy, but are we actually hurting ourselves? Are we making our team worse if we were to move one of these players? So that's the sort of pickle and conundrum that they found themselves in. I personally tend to think that when you do the same thing over and over again, and don't expect different results. So if you're going to do it and you're going to convince yourself that you need the warm, snuggly blanket of, oh my God, what are we going to do if we don't have this guy anymore? Instead of looking at the positive and the upside of, well, what happens if we were to take that 9, 10, whatever $1 million it is, and sprinkle it on 4 players, or vastly improve our back end, or whatever it might be to go in a slightly different direction. That to me is the welcomed approach. And maybe we're just meeting that naturally this upcoming summer with Nylander's deal coming up, and eventually then Marner. But I personally would have liked to have seen change come already, but they seem to twist themselves into a pretzel saying, oh my God, what are we going to do if we don't have these guys?
Yeah, it's pretty much it. And I've been saying for a couple of weeks, like, the proof is going to be put in the pudding, come the springtime. We'll see if this team can finally get over that hump in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Last one, Ryan Reaves. We just talked about it. I mean, we all know what this guy can bring in the room, but it's quite clear he can't play. I don't know how to put it, but like, he is really, really fighting it. He's struggling. The team is struggling when he's on the ice. Is there a scenario where the Leafs just admit their mistake and try to do something here?
I mean, there might be at some point, but I don't think not even a quarter of the way into the season is going to be the answer.
Yeah.
I think the easy answer is that so much of his cap hit, like 90% of it, can be buried in the minors, that there is a viable alternative. But for a 3-year deal to go this poorly, this quickly, I think has certainly been an eye opener for a bunch of people. I don't expect them to admit defeat on that just yet. And also, if there really is an opportunity for him to instill some change and maybe add a bit of fire to this team, and probably, as you mentioned, not necessarily from an on ice perspective, it's going to take a little bit of time for that to seep in, that I think they'd want to keep him there to see what that's like.